understanding of it is that that students and teachers and staff, people in the building, are encouraged to build relationships, to get to know one another, to understand who each other are and where they come from, and to be able to start from a place of shared understanding and respect. It also includes, it allows for then managing disagreements and challenges and interpersonal quarrels in a way that comes from a place of respect, comes from a place of being able to hear one another, and to quote someone from your group, I think, well, actually, I'm not going to even say it right, but to be able to have a meaningful engagement with one another and not walk away necessarily as friends, but to walk away respecting one another, and able to kind of re-engage with the larger group or the largest classroom and continue to do what I hope is learning and engaging in that work. Oh my gosh, and the second part was it just, sorry, I'm so sorry.
It's place in our schools. It's place in our schools.
Oh, yeah, I think that it's a fantastic model. I also just feel like from the research perspective know that it's evidence-based and that it is shown to be really effective in schools. What I will say is I think that it's also a really challenging model to implement well, and it takes a lot of training of teachers and support, and it takes enough people in the classroom to be able to kind of do that work and continue engaging and teaching and doing everything else. So I think that it can be really effective, but it's one of those models that also can't just be saying, hey guys, you need to start doing this from now on. It really takes dedication from everyone in the school building and from the district to be able to kind of support those practices and make it so that they're done well, so that it doesn't have a negative impact, but instead a really positive one.
Well, certainly my thinking about restorative justice was, and my ability to talk about it, was deeply enhanced by your group coming to the policy committee and educating us about it. And what your group so clearly articulated is that it is a shifted mindset that about the way that we create a school community where traditionally systems of discipline were based on punishments for certain kinds of behavior. And there's tons of research that show that does not work. And what it often does, and it often does for particular groups of students, is it ends in exclusion from the school environment. And by excluding and isolating students, you change nothing. You've just shifted it away. And so restorative justice is a whole process of trying to, well, what you helped me understand very clearly is it starts with creating a real community in schools, laying a foundation from the beginning of creating in classrooms and in the whole school community students feeling a sense of belonging and connection to one another. And with that foundation, when there is inevitably conflict, that if you've got that foundation, you can utilize that to bring people together, and there are processes that people can learn to engage in dialogue that can help them to understand harm that's been done and repair relationships and bring them back into the community.
What do I know? What's the second part?
Sorry.
The second part is, what do you know about restorative justice and what place do you think it has in our schools?
Great, thank you. So I know a fair amount about restorative justice. When I was at BOCES, I actually facilitated a number of book groups on restorative justice. I visited some schools in Rochester and New York City that were implementing restorative justice circles and things like that. I also think there are other ways to name similar approaches to conflict. Conflict managers, nonviolent conflict resolution would be two examples. When I was a principal at Newfield, I actually implemented a system that was very similar. They're all based on the concept that conflict is inevitable in a social environment. We're always going to have conflict. So the question is, what can we put in place so that when there is conflict, how can we identify what's at the root of the conflict? What are all the different people involved in the conflict or the bystanders? What is it that they actually need? How can we go about meeting those needs? And how can we repair the relationships that were harmed in the ways that people had advocated for their needs that were not safe, healthy, and effective? So we're restoring relationships, or we're repairing relationships. There are protocols. If you're going to use restorative justice model, there are protocols to help us do that, because that's not necessarily the natural way that people solve problems in our community or in our country. And it's ultimately designed to recognize that conflict will always happen. It's all about how do we deal with conflict in the ways that allow all of us to move forward so that we can retain our dignity and our respect.
I'm not an expert on restorative justice. We haven't spent an extraordinary amount of time this year as a board talking about our code of conduct, but right now in the policy committee we are in the process of reviewing the code of conduct, and so I've been reading the code of conduct and learning a little more about this. To me, restorative justice, is a framework that de-emphasizes punishment and allows students who might be having a conflict, to be able to work out that conflict with each other, learn a little bit about one another, develop empathy and understanding for one another, and kind of work those things out instead of having a more punitive model. In order to, where's the place for it in schools, I guess? In order to implement such a policy, we have to be fully staffed. I think that is very, very important because when you're doing these kinds of things, they take obviously efforts from teachers and people in the classroom to be there to be able to do this. It's also really important to find the time to do it. So, it's a very good policy, and it could lead to a lot of positive. The question might just be, when does one work on such a thing? Like, so if you're going to have, for example, a restorative justice circle, and you're, saying time out to maybe the academic portion of learning, and now we're moving into a more social, emotional learning in the classroom if you're doing such a thing. There needs to be time carved out to do those, and I think it's really important to have the right professional development for teachers so that A, they know how to implement the policies properly, and B, they can figure out how to have enough time to do that, and also do all the other things that they need to do in the classroom, such as academics and whatnot. So I think it needs a lot of attention if it's going to be implemented properly as a district, and looking forward to having more of those conversations.
Okay, Exhibit A of one of the problems. You keep hearing some people on this panel focus on the academic portion of what happens in the classroom. My mind has left that years ago. I'm trying to figure out how to get you credit, academic credit for what you're doing, and I thank you for. The way restorative justice got introduced to this district, myself and another administrator at high school, Dr. Corey Mitchell, we traveled to Syracuse and we met with the the experts in the field, the WINS. That was after years of watching referrals at the high school peak at, I think, 1,700. 1,700 a year. And I was sick of it. So we reached out to the folks at Syracuse Department of Education, went up and met them, and we decided it was time to bring it here. Here is one of my concerns about time. in relation to your question. Because we can't mandate training here, because our budget doesn't allow us to train everyone at one time, we always use the trained trainer approach, which means we can only select several people at a time to get the training, and then we rely on them to work on infusing that training throughout the rest of the educational situation. That comes with risk, because I've been through several crises in this district that have shook some of the things that we were trying to implement to their core. 2008 financial collapse is when I joined the board. The global pandemic we just went through, lead in the water crisis, crisis of our place. We keep getting interrupted. Our learning is interrupted as colleagues on this board because of things outside of our control. Which is why this is a moment in time when the state is threatening our finances, when we don't know what's going to happen with this election, when there are folks on this board who have actually been through the crisis and understand how this complex district works. I think it's a time to continue to allow people with experience to have their hands at the helm of this.
Thank you. My experience with, or my understanding of restorative justice is minimal. I do want to echo Eldred. I appreciate what he said about professional development. I think there are things that we really want to be able to implement in the district, and we can't really do that with teachers based on how our hands are tied. I can only speak on restorative justice from an experiential basis. One day I was in this very remote place in a country called Vanuatu in the middle of the South Pacific. That's where I was doing my Peace Corps service. And I had a community member come to me and say, 40 kids have been expelled from the school. And I said, what? What are you talking about? Well, the parents didn't pay as little as $5 for a school fee each, and the kids got kicked out of school. Well, I said, that can't happen. So I mobilized the community, worked hand in hand with them, and created payment plans for the parents. Now, I was also told, Steve, you pissed off the principal. And that led me to getting a restorative justice ceremony with him and me. And I was in the wrong. I was in the wrong because I didn't get his approval. And even though I was doing the right thing, I thought in my mind. And so the whole community sat down, and they call it Tangwata, which is similar to Obono in Hawaiian. So I understand the concepts, and I went through the process, and I value it because these are well-known indigenous concepts, Native American as well as Pacific, and they all are very effective in my experience in seeing them firsthand. Now, what I would like to at least just end with here is I feel like we need to continue on this path, but at the same time we need to ensure that we have the understanding to be accountable for the actions that we take on these restorative justice approaches and processes. So at my time on board, if I'm elected, I will definitely ensure that we can remain accountable and bring these and actually support the students' growth.
Yes, I have rudimentary knowledge about restorative justice, but I learned more about it tonight than and it's really inspiring. And it is night and day difference than what it was like when I was in school. So I really wish that we had something like that, when I was in high school, because I got in a lot of trouble, and I know what it feels like to be viewed as someone with behavioral issues, who's volatile and all these things. And in reality, it's like I know what it's like when you're struggling with a home life and you have a hard time just holding things together. And a lot of my friends were like that as well. And you get labeled as being a certain thing, and you get thrown out of class and thrown out of school. I'm just actually thinking about one of my best friends who I literally was having a conversation with last night, who was thrown out of school, never graduated high school, and was just now going back to get his GED. And that was a person who probably has gone through more trauma than anyone I mean, I've never heard anyone that's had a home life like this kid had. And, you know, he was just labeled as, you know, being a troublemaker, but he was just lost and needed someone to love him and, you know, needed to be humanized and to be seen as someone who's struggling. So I love that that's something that you guys are advocating for, and, you know, you're helping other students that desperately need to be seen and heard and understood. And it's like, it's genuinely inspiring. So I don't know, you know, the effectiveness of it or how it's being implemented in the school, but I know that it's desperately needed, and I really commend you guys for championing it. So thank you.
We'll start with Adam for the last question.
Are you planning to vote to pass?
BJ, hold on one second.
Are you planning to vote to pass the budget? What will happen if the budget doesn't pass?
Yeah, good question. Is your question, am I going to vote for the budget like as a citizen now, or do you mean?
Are you planning to vote to pass the budget?
Oh, sure.
What
Okay.
will happen?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So, I mean, as a board member who was, you know, involved in developing the budget this year, you know, the board obviously came together and came up with a budget that is now being proposed. You know, when we were talking about developing the budget originally, obviously there was a lot of feedback from the community. People were very unhappy with our first proposal for the budget, and you know, we sort of went back as a board, thought about that, and you know, just personally, I was involved with a couple of other people of putting forward a proposal to lower the budget, and the proposal that I was interested in would have been a 4% increase over last year. But when you're on a school board, there's a lot of compromise. There's 9 people on a board, and people have different philosophies. And so, as a board, you know, we came together and put out, you know, the best possible budget that we could come out with the 9 people under all of the circumstances this year. So, yeah, I am going to support the budget that I helped to propose as a board. You know, one of the things that was really important when we were developing the budget was that if we were going to make cuts, we weren't going to cut any student-facing positions. You know, we're still obviously hopeful that with our budget, that's what's going to happen. So yes.
Okay, so I have to take responsibility for being one of the primary board drivers for the budget we presented, the original budget. As the chair of the finance committee, I've worked intensely over the last several years to position this district to do the things we needed and wanted to do with that budget. I took my colleagues through some pretty intense learning processes this year. It's very difficult to understand how you move $160 million if you haven't done it before. And I remember one of my colleagues saying in a meeting, public meeting, he'd enjoy the board to manage a $170 million budget. But in fact, that's the only committee that's actually required of a board, is a finance and an audit committee. I could bore you tremendously, Kate and EJ, with all the things we've done to manage our money well. I'll just say this to you two and the community who's still staying around for this. The original budget we proposed was an 8% increase. 4% of that 8% was automatically going to be taken off the board for the same reason that all of us in this room have faced increases in our family budgets, because milk, cheese, gas, etc., rubber, they've all gone up by 50 and 60% since 2020. And we were being criticized for our budget having increased by 50% over the last 10 years. And to those people, I desperately wanted to say, what schools did you go to? Do you understand math? The additional 4%, what we wanted to do is give teachers and our other professionals an increase in their salary over and above the increases that we provided for them during the pandemic. Our teachers are coming off of a 25% raise which is going to end in 2025, and our negotiations have to start again. You've heard other people express the need to pay higher salaries for aides and get everyone in this community, at least this educational community, to a living wage. So not only am I going to support the budget, I feel responsible for it. And I'm still in a bit of shock that we had to decrease it to the extent we can. But taxes are real. And people let us know that.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so I want to pass the budget, and whether the community kicks it back or not, I still want to pass the budget. I think it's important that we fund our teachers and we don't cut any further related to our student-facing positions like I mentioned. Now, we're really in a catch-22 right here. I've said it many times. You know, we're either going to either raise taxes, or we're going to potentially compromise the quality of our schools. And no one should have to face this situation that we're in right now. And it's not an easy situation. I mean, I know that they've worked tirelessly on this budget, and I have to commend the process. Now, what's the concern in the community? There are a lot of people that are very upset. And I just want you to know that whether it passes or it doesn't, we need to do our job. And we need to maintain our schools, the students, and their future livelihoods. And that is what we do here as a school district, to support those students. So I just want to say that my background, I'm an auditor by trade. I manage an $88 million project that's National Science Foundation funded. I have experience related to budget management, analyzing costs, and asking really hard questions to CEOs and holding them accountable. And that's what I do in my day job. So I think it's going to be a hard process. It's not going to be easy. But I mean, why would you vote for me? And that would really be because I feel like I bring that depth and breadth of experience. So anyway, I know that this is a contentious issue, and I hope that we can move past it.
I would vote no. I would vote no for a couple of reasons. One is because there's still an opportunity to, go back, reevaluate, reanalyze, and propose something. I am absolutely not saying, cut wages or, teachers or, student-facing things like that. But I think that what's happening right now is we're at, an inflection point with the community, and you have people that can no longer afford to live here because the taxes have gotten so high. So there's a balance. Like, the school is a portion of that community, and the budget is bigger than just what happens within these four walls. It's what happens within the community. And we're at one of the board meetings, and there was a guy who's a 24-year veteran, and he worked at Cornell, and he was literally in tears because him and his wife are on a fixed income, and they can't afford to live here anymore. And that's, there's families that can no longer afford to live here. And there's residual effects of these taxes that go up. Like, if you have, a single mother or a single father, or even a family where it's like now they have to go out and get a second or third job, and they're not there to help support their kids when their kids come home from school. Or they're carrying all this extra stress and anxiety because, they have to determine well, I guess we're not going to go on this summer vacation, or, maybe I can't afford to buy new clothes because, our taxes are going up. Or maybe it's like, we're going to leave the community, period, because we can't afford to live here. So we're going to go to Binghamton or Syracuse or wherever it is because it's not sustainable. Like, the cost of living in this community, if you compare it to everywhere else in New York, it's a real thing that we need to pay attention to. And you talk about wanting to be heard, and you talk about change and stuff. And maybe the budget is not even about making these sweeping changes to it, but it's about telling the community hey, we actually hear you. We hear your pain. And we're going to take a pause right now. We're going to say no. We can't really guarantee that we're going to make all these big changes, but we hear you. And we're going to do our best to try to sharpen our pencils and and be mindful of the fact that like there is an impact on all the taxpayers and the people that own the homes and all the families that are being burdened by these higher taxes. So I'm going to vote no for now.
I think the way that Todd just ended is how I'm feeling. There has been such a lack of engagement through this process. The number of times that I have asked several senior administration officials for candid and honest, engaged conversations with our community about this budget. The number of times that I've been told to submit a question to Let's Talk, or to try to watch a recording for a 3-hour budget meeting or a 3-hour board meeting to try to find the answers that I wanted to find about the budget, or being told to go look all over the website and try to find some information. That's the answer that I get every time that I express my concerns, or more importantly, the concerns of the community. Because the role of someone on the board is to speak on behalf of the community. And the community, there's too many people in this community who are experiencing an immense amount of distrust within this district. I don't even know whether the anger about the budget would be so high if they trusted that what was in the budget was actually meaningful and being put towards policies and programs that were actually working. I'm really glad that we have 2 opportunities to vote on this budget. So when the budget gets voted down the first time, that we don't automatically get stuck with a contingency budget that may really take away so many of the student-facing positions that are so important to us, but it'll give the district an opportunity to hear and be responsive to the complaints that they've heard from so many people that they don't seem to have done yet.
Try to be succinct and actually answer what I understood was the second part of the question. So first, yes, I am going to vote for the budget. But coupled with that, I absolutely understand why some people are going to vote no. We don't know how many and will vote no. And you have to vote based on your personal circumstances. In terms of what will happen if the budget doesn't pass. So in fact, what we have legally as a board, the choice to do is we can put up a budget for a second vote, and that would happen on June 18th. But that would be for the board to decide, and it would be for the board to decide what is the amount. We could put up the same budget, we could raise it, we could lower it. And that's the work that has to be done in very short order to get the vote out by June 18th. We could choose to go straight to a contingency budget. And a contingency budget would be about $10 million less than the budget that is being proposed. There are certain things that are mandated to be taken out, and then there are certain things that are discretionary. The process of deciding on a new budget and the process of deciding on whether, if we go to a contingency budget, which we would have to do if a second budget vote failed, we would have to find $10 million to cut. Now, how is that going to happen? It's going to happen through it needs to happen through a very, very painstaking process of analysis. And it's going to be really time consuming. But the board's role in that is not to say, cut this, cut that, you have too many of this over here. The board's role is to ask questions, to hear what our budget makers, our leadership are suggesting that they're thinking about cutting, and to ask questions about what would be the impact of that. But we need to have deep analysis of what is being proposed to be cut.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back for a quick minute on restorative justice, because I didn't say the most important piece.